Public Radio and Kaiser Health News. Venezuelans are being asked to vote in a presidential election tomorrow. The result may seem a foregone conclusion. The autocratic Nicolas Maduro is expected to remain in power despite the economic catastrophe that engulfs his nation. NPR's Philip Reeves took to the streets of Caracas, where he found some deeply worried people.
In a Caracas market, a trader's listing the latest prices for fruit and veg. These days, he never has good news. Hyperinflation is devastating Venezuela. Life is so hard, says Elides Lopez, who sells mangoes and plums. Inflation's killing us. Lopez is among those who plans to vote in tomorrow's election in Venezuela. The mainstream opposition boycotted the poll because it says it's fraudulent. Yet Lopez thinks voting's important because somehow life here has to change, especially her life. Lopez used to work behind her fruit stall with her husband. 10 months ago, he was attacked in a nearby gas station by two men trying to steal his cell phone. They shot him in the chest, she says, and took his phone. He survived 5 days. After his murder, her mother, who's diabetic, became ill and went into a coma, she says. There's a dire shortage of medicine in Venezuela. Lopez launched a desperate appeal to her fellow Venezuelans on Facebook. Thank God we found a woman who had the meds we needed, she says. Talk to Venezuelans and you hear many stories like this. Hundreds of thousands have fled the country. Lopez would like to go too, but she tried to get a passport. She says she couldn't afford the $700 bribe the officials gave her. A few feet from the store, Carlos Bejo is buying a handful of potatoes. He sells hardware, but most of his work's dried up. His income's been rendered almost worthless by the collapse of the currency. He lives on fruit and veg and looks skeletal. I won't be voting for Bejo's. He has no faith in government or in the election's principal characters, President Nicolas Maduro and the main challenger, Henry Falcon, a former state governor. Falcon is the focus of much debate in this election. Venezuelans are divided over what to make of him. He used to be in the ruling Socialist Party but left in 2010. He wants to dollarize the economy and allow international humanitarian aid into Venezuela. That's helped him win significant support, although not from Venezuela's opposition.
I believe Mr. Falcon is part of the system we're trying to change.
Maria Corina Machado is one of the prominent opposition leaders. She believes Falcon's candidacy is legitimizing a fraudulent poll. Maduro's certain to be declared the winner, she says.
This is a farce, a sham process.
Many in the international sphere agree with that, including the United States. This doesn't deter Maduro's supporters as they rally ahead of an election they're confident is theirs. These include Jose Pimentel, who's 23. He says he likes President Maduro because he supports the young. He also buys Maduro's central argument that Venezuela's a victim of an economic war led by the US. Maduro still has a core support, and he and the ruling party also control the government's most powerful institutions. Most analysts appear to believe that means he'll remain in power. Back in the fruit market, Elisa Lopez is worried by that. She says no one knows what will happen after the election, as Venezuela's economic disaster further unfolds. But she says, I'm scared. Everyone's scared. Philip Reeves, NPR News, Caracas.
The Johnstown flood is one of history's great tragedies. More than 2,200 people died in May of 1889 when 20 tons of turgid waters, teeming with debris of houses, trees, and drowned animals, unleashed a biblical flood in the middle of Pennsylvania. Al Roker, the man who tells millions of Americans what the weather will be on NBC's Today Show, has written a book about what is still the deadliest flood in American history. His book, Ruthless Tide, the tragic epic of the Johnstown flood. Al Roker joins us in our studios here in New York. Al, good to be back with you.
It is good to see you again, Scott.
You mince no words in this book. You say this was a tragedy of human making.
This was during the Gilded Age, and this, the original one percenters in this country. They wanted, especially Western Pennsylvania. I mean, this steel moved this country. Steel helped build this country in the industrial age, and that steel was in Western Pennsylvania and throughout Pennsylvania, and the titans of steel and of coal and the railroads. And they wanted a club that their compatriots had out west, and so they created the South Fork Hunt and Fish Club, and they wanted to be able to go out boating and fishing. And so there in the Conemaugh Valley, they dammed up a river, created an earthen dam, but it was not well prepared, and the people were concerned about it. And they said this dam could fail, and if this dam fails, it would be catastrophic.
There was a lot of rain, wasn't there?
I mean, we talk about rain of biblical proportions. I mean, it was more than a foot of rain.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem was in the engineering of the dam. There was no way to, on a methodical basis, to be able to release water. The water just kept coming over the spillway and eroding the face of the dam, which was holding in all the rock and stone, and that gave way. Within 40 minutes, 20 million tons of water was emptied and heading down the Conemaugh Valley at about 40 to 50 miles per hour.
And as the water threatened to burst through, of course, in those days, no radio, no TV, no Twitter, no satellite photos of advancing storm or the water building up. Telegraph operators,
Yes.
in a sense, were our forebears, and some of them were heroes.
Yeah, and lost their lives. To one woman in particular, staying at her post, even though she probably knew that, given the scope of what was about to happen, she was going to lose her life. But she stayed.
This is Hetty Ogle.
To send messages down the valley. But the problem is, once you get those messages down there, how do you disseminate them? You know, again, there's, as you say,
Door to door is about it.
and that's about it. And by the time everybody realized the scope of this disaster, it was too late. You could not evacuate people in time. And so they were basically described as an unleashed monster.
What did it look like, sound like? Can we tell?
You know, there are some photographs of the aftermath, but people described this as a wall of water at some points 40 feet tall. And as it gathered steam, as it were, there were 3 other towns that got wiped out. But it also took out railroad cars, steel plants that were operating. I mean, it had molten lava, molten ore in it. There was a barbed wire factory that was wiped out. And so you have literally tons of barbed wire, razor-sharp wire, as part of this. So it has all of this debris that is moving forward, and it's gathering forward speed as this thing is going through. So people described it, as the sound of like 100 locomotives coming through.
This is, I believe, your second book about a
Yes.
disaster. This is part of what fascinates us, that disasters have the quality of war or crisis of creating heroes and sometimes villains.
I think they do. And what I find fascinating in a way is that as a nation, I think, and as a people, when disaster strikes, our hearts and our wallets open up. We want to help. You look at Hurricane Katrina, you look at Superstorm Sandy, there were heroes and there were folks who were given blame. We need that, in a sense, to understand the fact that this is something that in some ways we have no control over, but in other ways we do. These folks in this Hunt and Fish Club, over half of them did nothing to help alleviate the pain and suffering of the people whose lives were destroyed by their club. And it changed it brought in tort reform and liability laws, big changes in those, because most of these people who lost everything had no legal recourse to get anything back.
As we mentioned, Al, you are the weather for millions of Americans. Do you have any doubt about climate change?
No, I don't. And I don't think any right-thinking person who believes in facts and figures and can see what's happening. And hey, look, there are anecdotal things, and you can't just go by that. You have to go by data, and the data shows unequivocally that we are seeing a change in our climate.
Al Roker, his book Ruthless Tide, the tragic epic of the Johnstown flood. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
And shock mixed with a tragic sense of familiarity as details emerged about the shooting at Santa Fe High School. Here are some voices from yesterday's attack. Senior Bree Butler told NPR she was in history class when it began.
We kind of barricaded the door a little bit. While we were closing the door, a girl came up to the door and was like, let me in, and she was crying. And then finally somebody asked her what's happening. She said that she had heard gunshots.
A student named Evan San Miguel told local station KTRK he was lucky to have only been grazed by a bullet.
Terrifying. Like, I didn't even know if I was going to make it home or not.
The hospital was prepared. Dr. Safi Medane is ER medical director for Clear Lake Medical Center that received several of the victims.
We provide counselors, and we do have clergy here to help with the grieving process.
And Texas Governor Greg Abbott spoke at the vigil Friday evening for the victims.
Tragedy does strike. The hurting rips you apart. But soon we realize that God has provided us a different pathway to go down than what we had expected before.
But Bree Butler says part of her did expect something like this because she has seen it so many times on the news, and yet
You always think it's not going to be me. It's just weird to think that this isn't another state or another city even. This is my high school.
voices on the shooting at Santa Fe High School. You're listening to Weekend Edition from NPR News. This week, a painting by Kerry James Marshall sold for more than $21 million. It is believed to be the most ever paid for the work of a living black artist. The buyer was just revealed to be Sean Combs. It's the kind of work that more museums are trying to add to their collections. These pieces cost money, as it happens in the same auction were works by Andy Warhol and Franz Klein. We mention them because they were sold for exactly this reason, to fund acquisitions of art by women and artists of color. NPR's Andrew Limbaugh has more.
And leads us to lot number 22, property from the Baltimore Museum of Art, sold to benefit.
Let's start with the Warhol auction.
And I'll start the bidding at $2,200,000.
This is from Sotheby's auction house in New York City, where well-dressed people are making bids on Andy Warhol's oxidation painting. It's a rust-colored splatterwork made out of paint and urine. Bids go up until...
Ladies bid and selling at $2,800,000. Thank you, ma'am.
When a museum sells off pieces from their collection, there's a fancy $10 term for it, deaccession. And to do it, well, here's Christopher Bedford, the director of the Baltimore Museum of Art.
It's a very, very long, attenuated, moderately agonizing process to deaccession, and it should be.
A museum selling art is a little different from, say, you selling your old iPhone for a better one. That's because when a museum obtains a piece of art, it's making a sort of compact between them and the public, saying, I am buying this specifically so that you and other people in this community can come and see it. To sell is to sort of breach that compact. Museums often get in trouble for not deaccessioning the right way. For example, in Massachusetts recently, things got heated when the Berkshire Museum announced they'd be selling some pieces.
It's like your mother selling your heirlooms that you're supposed to get.
That's Carol Deal, a member of a campaign to save the art, talking to New England Public TV last month. The Berkshire's deaccessioning was opposed by the American Alliance of Museums and the Association of Art Museum Directors, groups that make the rules for this sort of thing. Those groups did, however, give their blessing to the Baltimore Museum of Art to sell pieces by Andy Warhol, Franz Klein, Robert Rauschenberg, and others. The idea is to make the collection better reflect the city, which is about 60% black.
We're actually not saying, in any sense, that those white males that dominate American museum collections are an illegitimate part of history. They are absolutely a part of history.
The pieces sold were stuff that was redundant, not shown that often, or even just kept in storage. The Baltimore Museum still has plenty of Warhols, Rauschenbergs, Kleins up on the walls. But with the money from the sale, Bedford is looking to acquire art by people of color and women, going back to the 40s.
I believe that we as museums have not properly represented art history as a consequence of conscious prejudice and unconscious prejudice. And it's our job now to go back and to begin to look at those artists who meet the criteria of excellence, but who have been written out for various different reasons, usually based on race or gender.
To not do this is to say that we already know everything. It's not representing the textures and experiences and lives of those people in that community.
That's Mileko Mohosi. He's a painter who's got an exhibition up at the Baltimore Museum of Art right now that happens to be about representation of black people in art.
And the Baltimore Museum is saying, no, that is not the case. We don't know everything, right? The things, the histories and the people and the cultures that are already dominant in the fine arts, that's not the whole story.
Baltimore Museum of Art Director Christopher Bedford says the museum plans on announcing what pieces they're buying with this new money at the end of the month. Andrew Limbong, NPR News.
This is NPR News.
You're listening to Weekend Edition Saturday on WHYY. It's 8:39. Still ahead this hour, Amy Hogarth is a British-American comedian who starred in Almost Royal as Royal Lowlife touring the United States. She will weigh in on today's royal wedding. That's ahead this hour on Weekend Edition Saturday.
Eastern State Penitentiary supports WHYY and hosts a new participatory art exhibit, Photo Requests from Solitary. This project invites men and women held in long-term solitary confinement in U.S. prisons to request photographs of anything at all, real or imagined, and invites volunteer photographers to make the images. This and 12 other artist installations are included with admission to the historic site. Learn more at easternstatepenitentiary.org.
Congratulations, fellow Americans. The plan codenamed Windsor Whammy has come to fruition. Our agent has successfully infiltrated the royal family. And once all other claimants to the throne are eliminated, she shall take over the United Kingdom and force them to say aluminum the normal way. I'm Peter Sagal. Will celebrate a win and talk to music icon Cyndi Lauper about how she likes to have fun on this week's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR. Saturday and Sunday mornings from 10 to 11 on WHYY.
Anticipate showers throughout the day today, high around 70 degrees. Rain into this evening, remaining cloudy overnight, falling back to 66.
Supporting WHYY, Penn Medicine. What if you were able to do things you haven't done in years? Like building a fort with your grandkids, dancing at a wedding, or simply taking a long walk. With advanced treatments for hip and knee arthritis, an innovative pain protocol, and a personal patient navigation team for recovery, the Penn approach to joint pain will help you get back to enjoying life again. Appointments can be scheduled at pennmedicine.org/joints.
Support for NPR comes from this station and from EBSCO, working in partnership with open source library technologies and open access journals to support libraries and their users. Learn more at EBSCO.com. From the Arcus Foundation, dedicated to the idea that people can live in harmony with one another and the natural world. Learn more about Arcus and its partners at arcusfoundation.org. And from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, working alongside others to build a culture of health for all. More information at rwjf.org.
This is Weekend Edition from NPR News. I'm Scott Simon. Foods that contain genetically modified ingredients will soon be required to have a special label. NPR's Merritt Kennedy reports that we're now seeing what that label might look like.
About 2 years ago, Congress passed a law that GMO foods had to be labeled.
On this vote, the yeas are...
The U.S. Department of Agriculture was put in charge of figuring out the specifics. It got 112,000 responses when it asked for feedback from consumers, farmers, and manufacturers, among others. Earlier this month, it unveiled the contenders, and they all look kind of like the labels you'd see on health food. They're brightly colored with greens and blues and yellows. They feature the letters BE. Below that, some of them have a curved line.
I mean, they look like a little smiley face.
George Kimbrell is the legal director for the Center for Food Safety, which pushed for labels. He's not happy with this design. The BE stands for bioengineered, a term critics say is unfamiliar to the public.
It's misleading and confusing to consumers to now switch that up and use a totally different term, bioengineered, that has not been the standard commonplace nomenclature for all of this time.
People are more aware of terms like genetically engineered, or GMO, which stands for genetically modified organism. In fact, grocery store shelves already have a lot of products with the label non-GMO. Kimbrell would prefer that foods with genetically modified ingredients be labeled with a circle around a G, or GMO. But industry representatives such as Nathan Fields of the National Corn Growers Association say the term bioengineered provides a clean slate.
There's some connotations around some of the other terms that have been used that do cast the technology in a negative light.
More than 90% of the corn grown in the U.S. is genetically engineered. The same is true of crops like soy and sugar beets. Although long-term risks of GMOs are hard to pin down, scientists have not found hard evidence that these crops are any less healthy to humans than other crops. Nevertheless, the public wants these labels. Polls show that a majority of Americans want to know whether their food is genetically engineered. Advocates like George Kimbrell say that people want to have the tools to make an informed choice about what they buy, and labels should make that possible.
It's the tip of the spear as to the future of our food and the debate as a society that we're having about it and how we produce it.
The USDA's proposal, which runs over 100 pages, leaves a lot up in the air. Authorities haven't decided whether labels should go on foods made with highly refined products like canola oil or cornstarch. And companies may be able to simply use a QR code, a kind of barcode that a phone can scan, to disclose facts about the product. So despite the debate over the smiley BE labels, a lot of companies that a phone can scan to disclose facts about the product. So despite the debate over the smiley BE labels, a lot of companies might just choose not to use them. The public has until July 3rd to submit comments on the USDA's proposal. Merritt Kennedy, NPR News, Washington.
Prince Harry of Wales and Meghan Markle of Los Angeles have been married at St. George's Chapel. The prince is sixth in line to the British throne and served 2 tours of duty as a British Army pilot in Afghanistan. Meghan Markle, now Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, went to Northwestern and is a successful actress. They're both active in humanitarian work. Amy Huggart joins us now, the comedian and actress who starred in the series Almost Royal on BBC America and is a correspondent for Full Frontal with Samantha P. Amy, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Scott. Thanks for having me on.
What did you notice? What did you like?
I actually really enjoyed it. I haven't watched a royal wedding before, but just from being British, I kind of feel like I've been watching this stuff my whole life. I watched it with Americans, and it was really funny to me that I found the whole thing quite modern and new for Britain, and they thought the whole thing was incredibly traditional and old-fashioned. So I think, yeah, we have very different takes on it.
Meghan Markle walked down the aisle solo. Do we read the proper amount or too much significance into that?
I think we're looking for a lot of significance in actually an only hour-long ceremony, so we're going to pick up on the small things. But it seemed to me a mix of sort of a family situation and her feminism, so however you look at it, it's just, yeah, I thought it was cool and brave that she did that. But I also think that we'll probably overanalyze it.
You know, Amy, I don't know if you've seen The Crown, but the last time a member of the British royal family married an American divorcee, there was an abdication and a world war followed. Are you worried about any of that now?
I'm not too worried. I think that Britain has changed quite a lot, so I think we're less struck by the fact that she's been divorced and that she's American. As far as I can tell, Meghan Markle doesn't have Nazi sympathies, and as long as that remains the case, I think we're all okay.
Yeah. There were, seeing it from a distance, a pronounced number of what we might think of as untraditional British faces visible there. African Americans, that very energetic Bishop Curry who spoke, African American and African Anglo musicians who played, the choir that sang Stand By Me. It was a lovely contrast to so much else we could cite.
Yeah, for me that was the main takeaway, was they had actually blended the different cultures really well. I felt like African Americans were represented, also Black people in Britain were represented as well, and I think that there's been a lot in the press about how it really hopefully is good for race relations. Like, the royal family is the whitest family on the planet, and they've welcomed someone new in and they've made a ceremony that reflects different cultures. I felt also, just watching it, if I was marrying a man and the whole wedding was about him and his family, I'd probably be a bit annoyed. But actually Meghan got a lot of her own thoughts and tastes in there, I can presume. And there was a lot of attention on her mum as well. so hot. I was like, great start.
You know, I guess we're expected to be cynical about this, but you know, I'm not. These are two good people. They're doing good things in the world. It makes me smile.
They seem like a cool couple, and I feel like I've been following on Twitter, and I haven't really seen any negativity yet. People have tried to dig up stuff on Meghan, and you can't. There's nothing out there. She just seems like a really nice person, as Harry does.
Amy Hoggart on the Royal Wedding, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Scott. Bye.
Michael B. Jordan and Michael Shannon star tonight in HBO's version of Fahrenheit 451. BJ Lederman, who does our theme music, has no role in the production. NPR's TV critic Eric Deggans says the movie transforms Ray Bradbury's classic novel for life in the age of social media and fake news.
HBO's movie upgrades a lot from its 65-year-old source material to look futuristic in the era of Instagram and Snapchat. Fake news and video from social media are plastered across giant skyscrapers dominating Cleveland's glittering skyline. Citizens live in plush, antiseptic spaces serviced by a Siri-like artificial intelligence called Yuxi, and information comes from the Nine, a version of the internet heavily regulated by the ruling ministry. Michael Shannon excels at playing verbose villains with a fierce, tortured humanity, and he does it again as John Beatty, a captain of the firemen who hunt down unauthorized information, especially physical books, to burn. Here he gives a typically intense speech explaining why philosophy books are so bad.
Here's Spinoza, one expert screaming down another expert's throat. We have free will. No, all of our actions are predetermined. Each one says the opposite. And a man comes away lost. Now, if you don't want a person unhappy, you don't give them two sides of a question to worry about. Just give them one. Better yet, none.
The voice chiming in at the end was Guy Montag, Beatty's prized protege. He's played by Michael B. Jordan, and some of the best moments in HBO's film come from watching him and Shannon show off the father-son bond between these two characters. They're so close that when Montag later develops doubts and tries to quit the job, Beatty can't quite believe it.
I just submitted your name to replace me as captain. It's not about that. Oh, so you're willing to throw away the 16 years that I've invested in you?
I have 16 years of the ministry, and I want to know why we burn.
This is a moody film, centered on the struggles each character faces living in a hypocritical society where happiness is equated with freedom from information. It's obvious Beatty knows more than he's saying about books and about Montag's past. Montag just wants to know why he feels so empty. Like the novel, HBO's movie uses book burning as a compelling allegory for the rejection of inconvenient or troubling facts. And when Montag meets a rebel trying to preserve books named Clarice, she reveals exactly how the ministry came to dominate America.
During the Second Civil War, the old tech companies developed systems to predict our thoughts. Then they became the ministry, or the ministry joined them. And they sold us what we wanted. Self and happiness.
You're telling me people wanted it this way?
The ministry didn't do this to us. We did it to ourselves. We demanded a world like this.
If you know Bradbury's novel, or the clunky 1966 film made of it with Julie Christie, then you know Montag eventually teams up with Clarice to fight the ministry. In truth, the predictability of this storyline is the film's biggest weakness, perhaps the built-in hazard of adapting a book that's inspired so much of our modern dystopian science fiction. Still, it's also a sleek, ambitious reimagining that gives two talented actors a lot of room to show their stuff. This is a good, not great film, and to some, its message on the impact of distracting, superficial media may seem obvious and heavy-handed. But when fake news can affect real elections, there is no better time to consider the lessons of this modernized Fahrenheit 451. I'm Eric Deggans.
Hello, listeners. This is Patrick Stewart. Over the years, I have perfected the art of using my voice to command others, from the members of Starfleet to the mutants of X-Men. Though it is a useful power, I try hard to not use what my wife calls my Mr. Bossy Pants voice in normal day-to-day interactions. It's not so easy. Why, just yesterday at the coffee shop. Young man, will you give me a double cappuccino with extra foam and bring it to my table in the corner? Make it so. Yeah, like I said, I'm working on it. How does this sound? Fellow listeners, WNYC works so hard to offer its excellent programming, and they rely on your support. Pledging is easy, fast, and effective. Please consider making it so. And thanks. Wow, I did it! And that was kind of nice.
And you can do it too by calling us at 888-376.
Use your Mr. Bossy Pants voice.
Look, okay, the number to call. No, we can't command.